Chair Bowman, Vice Chairs Drazen and Pham, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Annessa Hartman. I'm a state representative for House District 40, Gladstone, Oregon City. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present you House Bill 3582 with the -3 amendment. Before I begin, most of you are aware that I made a commitment to center the voices of survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And I have been painfully vulnerable in my time here as a legislator that I am also a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. And while we are typically used to hearing from the chief sponsor the technicalities of this policy, my testimony will really center around the deeply personal and painful part of this work. And I do have to say before I begin, I thank my Chief of Staff, Daniel Mulkey, and these wonderful legislators slash emotional support attorneys next to me for really creating that safe space to be vulnerable in a place that's not always the most trauma-informed. And there will be experts that come after us that will speak to some of the technicalities and, you know, the more lawyer type of speak and questions that you might have. With that, I would like to just provide a quick trigger warning that House Bill 3582 will be discussing topics around sexual assault, abuse, and child sex abuse. So please take care of yourself for those that are listening and for people in this room. Today in Oregon, if you were sexually assaulted as an adult, you have only 5 years from the time you discover or should have discovered the connection between the abuse and the harm it caused to file a civil lawsuit. For survivors of child sexual abuse, it's either until age 40 or 5 years from discovery, whichever is later. And now to some, that might sound reasonable, but it completely misses the mark on what we now understand and know about trauma and how it presents itself. The average age at which a survivor of child sex abuse comes forward is 52. 52. For many adults, it can take years and sometimes decades to even begin the process of what happened, let alone speak it out loud publicly. Many never come forward because our society has told survivors that they should have known better. What took you so long? Why now? Are you sure that's really what happened? And these arbitrary deadlines don't reflect how healing works. They reflect how bureaucracy works. They force survivors to defend not just what happened to them, but when and how they process it. They invite defense attorneys to turn discovery into an interrogation of a survivor's healing timeline. House Bill 3582 eliminates civil statutes of limitation for survivors of child sex abuse and adult sexual assault for future claims. It brings Oregon in line with 19 states and the federal government who have already eliminated these time limits, with 25 states opening look-back windows to revive all expired claims. The -3 amendment, which is the same as the -2 other than a slight technical fix, does one more crucial thing. It removes the word knowingly from ORS 12.117 and 12.118 and applies that fix to past and future claims. Currently, to take advantage of the extended statutes of limitation, survivors must prove that an organization knowingly allowed the abuse to happen. That single word, knowingly, has been used by schools, hospitals, churches, and youth organizations to shield themselves from responsibility. Even when red flags were everywhere, even when patterns were undeniable, unless a survivor can prove the institution had actual knowledge that they specifically were being abused, some courts will throw out the case. And that's not the standard we apply in other areas of negligence. If someone slips on a wet floor, they don't have to prove the store knew they were going to fall. But survivors of sexual abuse are held to a much higher and unfair standard. Colleagues, being a survivor in this building and doing this work to center their experience has been one of the most challenging experiences I've had as a legislator. Just like the many questions one gets if they come forward, I was also presented with questions like, what about the accused or the wrongfully accused? How is someone going to try a case 40 years later? Or how do we know they are actually telling the truth? And this is just going to open the floodgates of people coming forward. How are we going to handle that? And maybe you are one of the lucky ones who doesn't know someone who is a survivor, or maybe you're the luckiest of us all that you yourself has not experienced this. But let me tell you, when someone says to you, there isn't a day, when someone says something like that to you, there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't think of that one night. That I think, why didn't I just get out of the car? That I knew what that feeling was in my gut because it wasn't the first time. I couldn't go inside a walk-in fridge for years without the fear that someone was going to follow me in. And I couldn't even open my personal freezer without holding my breath because that smell took me back to the place where I was first assaulted at 18, the day before my birthday. And it wasn't until much later in life that what I thought was a superpower of always recognizing body language and being hyper aware of everything around me and constantly looking over my shoulder and planning for the worst was indeed not a superpower, but it was trauma. And so believe me when I tell you, if a survivor makes the decision to come forward, it was not done easily. And I do want to be clear that the bill is not retroactive. It was obvious early on in the crafting of this policy that adding retroactivity was a non-starter for many in this building. And that was a painful and deliberate concession, and I have to call attention to it because I have to acknowledge that all of the survivors that are listening and potentially in this room, that if this passes, this will not apply to them. And this will not apply to someone like me and the many people I have met over the past several years as being a legislator. But this bill fixes what we can now, and it ultimately sends a powerful message to future survivors. You don't have to justify how long it took to come forward, and you don't have to defend the way you survived. We believe you, and we are finally changing the law to reflect the fact that justice for what happened to you should never have an expiration date. And I really want to thank the individuals who will come after me, including the legendary victims attorneys Aaron Olson, Peter Jancy, Amy Bruning, and Amber Kinney for their work on this bill, and the survivors and their advocates who are here fighting for the bill, as well as the committee for hearing it. And with that, I respectfully urge your support for House Bill 3582 with the -3 amendment. Thank you.